TOA community, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Robert Linkle, trainingtheolderadult.com. I want to talk to you today about my favorite mobility and how I recently saw, a little bit while ago, February last year, so 12 months ago, where they were looking at the half kneeling windmill as a loaded core exercise more than a mobility or vice versa. Okay, so I thought this would be interesting. Pop on here. Men's Health magazine, is this the missing abdominal exercise that everybody should be doing, that kind of a thing? I think it's an extremely functional lift. It's one of my favorite mobilities because it does a ton of value for my back, my hips, my shoulders, okay? But there's very specific ways that it needs to be done. You can do this with clients that can't get on the floor, so I'm going to show you that option as well. And doing this movement loaded, yes, it works a lot of really good core strength. And more importantly, it's probably a general locomotive movement that helps us specifically with getting our bodies off the floor. And I think that's where like the true value is. I'm not going to say half kneeling windmills are going to give you a six pack and that's going to make your obliques, stick out a little bit more. Then that's not the purpose. We're looking at this as a true functionality approach in terms of how can I maximize, utilize a specific exercise to really target improving a mobility and a strength and a coordination that can help me in my daily life actions, okay? So Men's Health magazine kind of dives into this a little bit. They also had another one, let's see, this was August 2021, talked about doing this, is it the missing exercise? And they have some videos that kind of go into it. They have a couple of cues here for you to kind of focus on, but more or less I want to take you through it in a mobility version of how we perform it, but then also how we do it loaded, okay? So let's start with the version of I can't get on the floor and I need to perform a windmill standing, okay? So you have a client's got a knee replacement and they've got scar tissue, they've got a ACL injury, scar tissue, something like that, and they don't like putting their knees on the floor, and or they're not capable of putting their knees on the floor, okay? Simple way to do this to start, even foot, hinge over, place your hand in the middle of both feet, and then you're gonna reach and rotate back up with one hand. You can come down to the bottom and kind of wrap underneath, so you're doing almost like an open book or a thoracic rotation, okay? But once you do a couple of these and you're like, okay, I'm starting to loosen up, well, now we wanna return to the standing position. So now we're gonna get the action of hinge, reach, back, return. Hinge, put all of your weight down. This is the key to this. You don't just like touch your hand down. Your back is still loaded and holding me if I just put one finger here, right? But if I put my entire hand down, or if you have wrist issues, your entire knuckle down, right? Your full fist, put all of your weight there, unload. So now your back is like, right? Your back gets to relax when you go into this hinge position. That's where the benefit of this comes in. Now, is it as good when you're standing versus the half kneeling? Probably not, okay? The half kneeling position, I think, is where you're gonna get the most benefit out of this. We'll go to the weight here in just a moment, which these new sandbells, Go Ruck, big shout out to Go Ruck. Boy, I love these. I'm so comfortable for this kind of stuff. If you're doing any kind of like get-ups or overhead kettlebell work, these are fantastic because they're super soft and pliable, heavy and manipulatable, and you can throw them, like drop them, swing them, toss them, and they still have a rigidity to them that will, basically use like a kettlebell, but without the round, curvature that kind of dents on your arms. I personally don't have any issues using kettlebells, but a lot of folks do. This is a great alternative, okay? All right, so front shot, half kneeling windmill, okay? Basically at 90 degrees on the left, 90 degrees on the right. Our goal from here is to take your right foot, your back foot, and pivot it and put it on what I call the other train track, okay? So let me give you just a quick rear shot of this. Left foot's on the left track, right foot's on the right train track. I go down to my knee, and now I'm gonna pivot my left foot over to the left track. Why do we do that? A little bit of external rotation on this hip allows me to hinge here a lot more comfortably than if my leg is straight or even turned out a little bit. Now I'm internally rotated my hip and trying to hinge. I'm going against all my mechanics, okay? So I wanna have that foot turned. So my half kneeling windmill, my right hip, my kneeling hip's almost over here. Let's call that at like 45 degrees, while my left hip is here at 0, okay? Now from here, I'm not gonna bend forward and come down. I want to hip hinge. I want to displace. So watch my hip in relation to the kettlebells behind me, okay? I'm going to push my hip back so I can put my hand down. I'm not gonna just fall over and place my weight down, right? So think of like an RDL or a hinge, a stiff leg deadlift, where you're displacing, you're pushing your hips back to cause that posterior chain stretch. That's what we're looking for here. So for me, it's going to be posterior chain, abductors, as well as my hamstrings. As I'm kind of pushing my hip, we call it the sassy hip. Hey, like put that sassy hip out, put the right hand down, and in this position, half kneeling, if I put it, I'm on the pad. If I put it on the pad, I'm level height from my knee to my hand. If I want to go sub floor, I can go off the pad. That gives me 2 more inches of depth, okay? Now the key here is I'm still sticking my tailbone out after displacing, and I'm putting all of my weight down, okay? From here, keeping the knee alignment, keeping my hip engaged, I'm going to reach and rotate up, trying to get to vertical, and I'm gonna take my gaze, as they'd say in like yoga and such, take your gaze up with you, okay? Now the gaze is kind of the key. I like to take my eyes with me if I can, but if you have vertigo, any other kind of crystal-based dizziness disorders, anything like that are affected here, keep your eyes looking at the floor the whole time, and this will keep you from getting dizzy. I pick one focal point on the floor, and I can still perform this. Now, as you might think, why don't I just keep looking up the whole time? There is a equilibrium issue. As you're looking up, if you keep looking here, but you change your depth, it starts, you almost see like tunnel vision as you're coming down. So that's another one. That's just anecdotal. I don't have research on that. But my client's perspective, they do way better looking down than looking up, okay? All right, so a quick review on the train tracks: pivot the foot, shift the hip, unload your weight. You have to put your weight down, because now my QL, quadratus laborum, right? My erectors of my low spine, my glutes that are basically like lowering me, right? They're like lower down into that hinge position. They're still loaded and they're like holding tight, holding tight. I put my hand down, they get to relax now. And that's the whole idea. Let me put you into a stretch position, let me relax, and then I'm gonna create rotation in here where I'm getting that big stretch. And that's the goal. This is the beauty to this, is can I get to 180? Maybe even further. Can I even go back a little bit more? Now, once we can do that, and I can repeat this, okay, either on the pad or subfloor, right? And I can repeat this, we have a couple of options. I can go now to make this a little bit more difficult in range of motion by taking my 45-degree angle and bringing it in. I can start to hip hinge forward almost, and eventually put my hand in front of my arch on my front foot. And now, you can see I can't get as far there, because now I'm starting to contort, and I'm finding where my tightness is. So I'll do, if I'm gonna do 10 of these, I'll do 5 at 45, and then I'll do a couple more at probably like 35 degrees, I guess I would say, something like that, if we're calling this 0. So I'm gonna start to kind of work my way closer in, but I know where my range is, where I can still get to 180, still get the benefit, starting to loosen up, but every one of these I'm trying to improve a little bit. How long do we hold it? 2-3 seconds, and then continue to the next. This is dynamic mobility, which means you're constantly on the move while you're going through it. We're not holding for 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds like a static stretch. I want you continually moving. 2-3 seconds, go again, okay? All right, so from here, if we can do a half kneeling windmill, and the client's like, I'm good, I feel good, I can get to 180, I can do repetitive reps. Now we could grab 2.5, 5, 7.5 pound dumbbell, or you can start to work your weights into something heavier. So whatever that implement might be that you're gonna hold, okay, we'll get into the racked position or half kneeling press position, take my weight up, and again, once I have it here, my goal is to establish vertical by holding my arm, looking up, seeing that it's vertical, keeping it in that position. I'm gonna displace my hip, put all of my weight down onto my knuckles, unload, reach, kind of feel as I'm putting my sassy hip out, feel that stretch in my glute, my hamstring, my erectors, my QL, and then return as I reach up, okay? Come all the way down, unload, take a second, 1, 2, 3, and then return back upright. It's an active return back upright. Think of it like up out of the kettlebell swing, eccentric RDL stretch, up out of the kettlebell swing as far as like tempos go, right? So I wanna slowly eccentrically work my control 2-3 seconds to merge onto the floor. Slow, 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 up, quick, okay? As I come, not too quick, not so much you're gonna torque anything, but think of tempo from that kind of coming up. Almost like if I had to give you a visual, I don't want you to do these, but like a crunch or a sit-up, right? Up quick out of the sit-up and then you're coming down with eccentric control. It's kind of like that emphasis or that energy that you're putting in the lift, even though it's a much safer, much better lift to be doing. Your torso isn't going to change in terms of pliability of your sternum getting closer to your pelvis, which rounds your back and encourages that lower back discomfort, disc disorder, sciatic symptoms, etc. Now, when we talk about sciatica specifically too, this is a great one for sciatica, okay? Get into this half kneeling position. And then if you don't have hip replacements like me, you can put your hand on your own thigh and start to push. And I would push traction via my hip through my iliac crest, across the top, not the iliac crest, but my femoral head is in the acetabular socket, okay? That's connected, the acetabular socket's at the base of the pelvis, at the top of the iliac crest, all your musculature distends off of that. So if I push on the upper end of my femur and start to displace tension away, the labrum will catch on the inside of the acetabular socket and pull the pelvis with it. And as the pelvis pulls and you're relaxing and pushing away, you will traction the lower lumbar spine. Do you want to do this with load in your hand? No, this is the mobility version of it. So I can hinge, right? Get into my position, do my windmill, and then I can take my hand here, put it on my inner thigh. Remember, if you have hip replacements, don't do this because you're going to dislocate your hip. But you're then going to push, and you're trying to kind of displace that traction, horizontal traction position for the lumbar. Hold 1, 2, 3, let your hand go, come back up. Hinge, reach, come down, push, and return. And those little tractions can create some really good relief in the spine there. Half kneeling windmill, mobility, half kneeling windmill, the standing version of it, into the loaded half kneeling windmill. And the kind of the ultimate goal with this is as you get stronger, more comfortable, more pliable, I guess I would say, is to do a standing windmill where we're going to brace that weight overhead. I'm going to unlock my hips, slide my hand down, try to touch, my shoelaces or mid shin, whatever the case is, but you're looking up, reaching up, and we're working, a pretty good range of motion here without rounding your back, where you'd feel, fairly confident, fairly secure in that core strength to hold, 6 kilos, 8 kilos, 13, 18 pounds, somewhere around in there, and work into these positions. These are challenging positions, and they are exposed. What I mean by exposed is you are exposing your lower back to a position that if you're not strong enough, it's gonna go out, it's gonna throw out. Now, is that risky or bad? Not necessarily, as long as you're doing it in a smart way. You'll get stronger and stronger, and this will protect you for the times when it's always ipsilateral reaching, okay? Typically is where the injury occurs, where it's like, here's the couch, and something fell behind the couch, and so your right foot, right hand, and you're reaching here to get something that's ipsilateral, same hand, same arm, because we're used to contralateral with mostly anything you do. If you were gonna help someone up, you'd put your right foot and then you'd grab them with the left hand and you'd pull, because that's closing the two angles. I'm strong pulling someone from a closed contralateral position. So it's these ipsilateral positions that kind of tend to leave us exposed for injury, and they do happen on occasion. So if I get good at these positions, these windmills, these loaded positions, when those positions come about or something similar, I'm now kind of prepared and I've trained for it. But how often are we going to be picking up 25 pounds, 8 kilos, 12 kilos, something along those lines, from an overhead position into a hinge and a return? Am I going to be picking up 25 pounds from behind a cooler or behind the couch? Probably not. I'm picking up socks or dryer lint sheets or my wallet, something like that that's not heavy, but it's in an awkward position, and we have to kind of reach and expose ourselves lower back wise to something that's going to damage us. And that's when the injury will occur. You'll feel it in the moment. You'll feel, ooh, that didn't feel right. And then you try to stretch and you try to do all these other things. The damage has been done, right? Somebody just poked you in the eye and they scratched your cornea. And in the moment, you're like, wow, that didn't feel good. But you kind of blink it off. And then a couple hours later, your eye's all red. A couple hours later, you're losing vision. A couple hours later, it's all swollen and puffy. This is residual back pain. That's what occurs is there's a overstrain and then it starts to swell, and it takes time for that to swell, where you roll your ankle, that thing swells up in a couple of seconds, you know? It's a whole different ballgame. That's how the lower back works, unfortunately. These are the types of exercises, mobilities and loaded exercises that can do great benefit to protecting that lower back, hips, anything around that trunk, hip girdle, lower back area. This is a very, very good benefit. And you're getting some good shoulder girdle work too with the loading, unloading on the floor, the reaching, the rotation, that transverse rotation through the trunk. There's a lot of benefit to this. So if you're not currently doing these, I encourage you to put them in. Lower back hip issue, folks, we do a lot better, in my opinion, in half kneeling than we do in the 6-point positions when we're trying to do windmills or thoracic rotations from a 6-point position. When we're able to prop a hip and just kind of work more of an angular attack than a true rotational transverse position, it's just a lot more pliable. It's a lot easier for us to kind of move in those due to the limitations of the surgeries. But as we get more capable, then getting down into that 6-point has a lot of benefit, okay? So this is a very good tweener. If I had to pick one for anybody out there who's just not terribly mobile and or kind of recovering from some of the surgical interventions, a low back discectomy, lower back fusions, disc replacements, hip replacements, arthroscopies of the hip, even knee replacements. Your hip mobility is really altered and your lower back is really altered with a lot of knee surgeries as well because of compensation for a while, but then after the surgery, whatever's been adjusted or fixed, you're now in different alignments and your body's like, whoa, we haven't been straight or not crooked or not contorted for so long. Well, now your back aches and your hip aches and all that. These are the exercises that will help you overcome those. Sorry for the super long rant here at the end, but I hope you like it. There's such good value to this lift. I didn't want to not do it justice by going into depth. So I hope you liked this. Any comments, questions, hit me up down below. I'm happy to do that. I hope you continue to fight your good fight against sarcopenia. I love and appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for subscribing and liking, leaving comments, everything that you're doing to help us grow this channel. Thank you all so much. Robert Linkle, trainingtheolderadult.com, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.